Hello, and welcome to UK Fish Cam. In today's episode, we're going to be looking through the West Sahara to try and find some unexpected creatures. In this large expanse of desert with many sand dunes, the last thing you'd expect is to find a frog. But nestled in this tiny Moroccan oasis was actually a whole pool of frogs. In the cooling waters of this oasis, you can actually see a Moroccan green frog very proudly chirping on his rock, claiming it as his territory. Whilst these frogs are mostly nocturnal to escape the scorching heat of the sun, these guys couldn't let up for 1 minute because they were defending their territory for mating. As you can probably hear in the background, these frogs were chirping and making so many different noises to let each other know who was boss. If you look carefully, you can actually see multiple different frogs defending this little strip of stream, making sure that none of the other males enter their territory. You can tell the males from the females with their khaki green colour that ranges all the way to a bright green, whereas the females are completely brown. This male then decides his perch isn't the optimal place to find the ladies and moves on. And lo and behold, a couple minutes later there's a load of commotion, as a female frog, as you can tell by the brown colouring, actually enters the equation. She remains still and makes it very clear to the frog on the right that she's not interested. There's nothing he can do but keep defending his territory and hope another female approves of him. I'm sure we've all had that happen to us before. With almost all amphibians, the female is actually the larger of the two, and therefore the male must jump on the back of the female in order to fertilise the eggs as she releases them, which, if you actually look to the left, you can see a male have a go at. The female shrugs him off very quickly, however, because she is likely not gravid. Again, all this frog can do is keep singing and hope his song is louder than his neighbours in order to attract an interested female to his territory. There are plenty of females in this pond, so surely he has a chance with one of them. But yet again he's unsuccessful as another female that enters his area escapes. Now, some eagle-eyed viewers might notice that all the action isn't actually above the water, instead below the water. There's actually some giant tadpoles, as these guys didn't even have any legs yet and still were about a third of the size of the adults. These tadpoles feasted on the algae that grew thick around the reeds in the heavy desert sun. With all the frogs fleeing as they came to collect the camera, let's move on to our next location. Whilst our last location was a rocky desert stream, this location was more of a marsh. With boggy ground and vegetation cover, this was a perfect place for a frog. This frog here was clearly much older, as the yellows on his body were a lot more vibrant. This section of the oasis was actually sheltered by a man-made bridge, and therefore he was out of the searing sun. However, this frog did not back down from exposing himself to the elements in order to defend his territory, as he could hear other males singing and therefore had to join in with his own entry to the chorus. Now, let's leave this frog alone and move on to our next area. As you can see, the midday sun is absolutely beaming down on this pond, hence why there's so much string algae building up on the sides. Frogs weren't the only inhabitant of this oasis, as it was full of invertebrates like water boatmen and something that's drawn by the frogs, dragonflies. Dragonfly larvae are actually the top predators in the pond ecosystem, and one of their favourite prey items is actually tadpoles. Tadpoles represent a really easy meal for the dragonfly larvae, as they can't fight back and the sharp jaws of the dragonfly larvae can capture them and digest them fairly easily. And talking of dragonfly larvae, the dragonflies here are actually laying eggs in the water, as they're putting the tips of the tail in the water, which allows them to lay their eggs directly in without becoming dangerously close. To transition from a nymph to an adult, the dragonfly larvae will actually walk up the stalk of a reed. Here they will shed their final molt and let their wings dry and be ready to fly off and start the cycle again. There'll be close-up images and videos of the dragonflies later in the video. This algae mat provides shelter and food for many different animals, and it provides a perch for the frogs to rest on. If you look at the algae mat, you may be able to notice some of the frogs' heads poking above. Also, you might be able to see, almost like a scene from the Alien movie, some of the frogs are trying to burst their way through the algae mat from underneath. Why on earth they're doing this, I don't know, but it's definitely a weird one to watch. And of course, as soon as one frog turns up and starts chirping, they all start joining in and even more start turning up. Despite living in desert habitats, this frog is surprisingly not endangered. It is actually classed as least concern, which is the lowest rating an animal can get on the ICUN list. They're also known as Sahara frogs and they live in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Spanish North Africa, and some of them have even been found in France, where it is unsurprisingly an invasive species. The main problem for these guys is the overexploitation of freshwater bodies where they live, and obviously living in the Sahara there's not that much water to go around. Now I want you to focus on the frog that's on the right here. He's about to make a noise using his vocal sacs and you'll actually be able to see them. The mechanism of how frogs make noise using their vocal sacs is actually quite weird. The frog will inhale air in order to inflate these vocal sacs. These organs allow the frog to hold the air and actually release it in a controlled manner to make a different pitch sound. Additionally, the vocal sacs actually help the frog to appear louder as they are resonating chambers which amplify the noise. Now, this isn't a one size fits all thing because many different amphibians, not only frogs, such as toads as well, actually have these vocal sacs, and they can either have one or two, and they can be different sizes in order to make different noises and at different volumes. Now, you'll notice these Sahara frogs actually have two vocal sacs, and they make a quite distinct chirpy noise, and when they use these vocal sacs, it actually makes this chirp noise a lot more raspy. Now I have to thank my glamorous assistant because I couldn't ask for a better model than this green frog here. He is very territorial and likes to show us where his vocal sacs originate from, which is around the throat area of the frog. Unfortunately, we'll have to say bye to him soon as he scares all the other frogs off and we're moving on to the next area. Now, bonus points to anyone who actually managed to spot a swallow drinking from the water by skimming the surface. They do this because their bodies are so well adapted for flight, their feet are actually incredibly small and they barely ever sleep, often flying multiple days without any rest during the annual migration. Now, if you know me, you'll know I can't resist getting some underwater shots of these frogs. Now, what I found most interesting is the way they actually hold themselves in the water, using their massive legs to distribute their weight evenly so then they actually stay perfectly still. Now here's some close-up videos of the frogs with a video for each the male and the female so then you can tell the difference. Here you can see the female is a dull brown with a wider build and the male is definitely green with a slimmer build. A pretty good rule with frogs is if you come back at night you're probably going to find a toad. And as if by magic, as soon as the sun fell, the toads came out. These are Berber toads and they're another Sahara specialist. These guys are an olive colour with some red or orange spots on them. These guys have a quite stocky build which allows them to hide during the day and have been found as high as 8,700 feet. Now there's some very cool and very pretty toads. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this journey looking for these elusive amphibians. I've really enjoyed it and I hope you did too, so please let me know what you thought in the comments. Bye!